get right into the basketball. Alabama beats Texas A&M on the road, and the game went similar to how I expected, but there were definitely some things that I didn't expect, right? The score, for those of you unaware, the final score of this game was 94-88. My score prediction was 83-78. That score actually did happen. That exact score happened with maybe about 10 minutes to go in the game. So my kind of thought on Alabama being able to be the better team, but A&M's rebounding, being able to keep them in it, was a bit true. But I think really the thing that kept A&M in this game was how poorly this game was officiated. This game was an absolute official fest. When you look at SEC games and how SEC officials call games, sometimes you'll see a game where the officials stay completely out of the game and it's really, a fairly evenly called matchup and it looks like a pretty clean basketball game. And then you get a game like this Alabama A&M game, right? So, for example, the Kentucky-Mississippi State game started 30 minutes after the Alabama game. It finished before this Alabama game due to how many fouls were called and how much the officials stayed in this game. Just two completely different officiated games, and that's really the sad part when it comes to SEC officiating. This game just had no flow from a standpoint of the officials kind of inserting themselves into this game. A&M ends up having 2 people foul out. Alabama has 2 people foul out. There is a total of 58 fouls in this game and 88 foul shots. That just leads to a very terrible flow of a game. It leads to a game that's just tough to watch at times, and a game where it really feels like defense isn't really even allowed to take place, right? There were a few moments in this game where it felt like if you were defending at all, you were getting called for a foul. And then, oddly enough, there were other moments where it felt like people were getting hacked and you just weren't blowing the whistle, right? It was poorly called from the get-go. And that was on both sides, right? There were poor calls against Alabama. There were poor calls against Texas A&M. I thought that just in general, this game was not called to the level in which you want an SEC basketball game to be called. It's something that they talk about a lot. I know Southeastern 16 is going to, I'm sure they will talk at length about this one. This is just not the type of game that you want to watch because it makes for a terrible, terrible viewing experience when the officials insert themselves into this game at the level in which they did. But, obviously this game happened, so let's talk about what actually happened, outside of the officials. First and foremost, I thought that the difference in this game was how well Alabama rebounded. A lot was said, and I made a note about it, about how good Texas A&M is rebounding the basketball. They're the number 1 offensive rebounding team in the country. They're an incredibly good rebounding team, and at times it's their only offense. However, Alabama out-rebounded A&M. They out-offensive rebounded them. They out-defensive rebounded them. They just completely out-rebounded A&M from the get-go. And it really felt like Alabama had more fight on the glass this entire game. And in my opinion, it ended up being the big difference in this game. Alabama out-rebounds the game by 8. Alabama shoots decently well in this game. Definitely not their best percentages. Their 2-point percentage actually took a dip in this game, shooting only 45% compared to their average of about 60 to 70. The 3-point percentage, I thought by and large, for most people, the 3-point percentage in this game was pretty good. The 2 exceptions were Grant Nelson and LeBaron Fallon did not shoot super well. But outside of that, Aiden Holloway, Chris Youngblood both go 3 of 6. Mark Sears goes 4 of 10. Stevenson goes 1 of 3. Reed goes 1 of 3. You're completely fine with all those numbers. The 0 of 4 from Grant and 1 of 5 from LeBaron was really the only numbers that were not ideal. Obviously, then the free throw numbers. Jaren goes 3 of 6. You'd like to see that number be a little higher. Mo D goes 0 of 2. You'd like to see that, obviously, him make one. Darion goes 6 of 9. Excuse me. So there were definitely some moments in this one where it felt like the free throw shooting could have been better, but the free throw shooting for A&M was even worse. They made just one more free throw, even though they had 8 more attempts. So, I mean, free throw shooting for both teams was not where you want it to be. Alabama shooting just 67%. But as I said, the difference in this game was really how physical Alabama was on the glass, right? Alabama was super physical on the glass, and it was the difference in the game, right? Grant Nelson has 4 offensive rebounds. LeBaron Philon has 4 offensive rebounds. Stevenson had a huge game. He actually wins the hard hat. He has 3 offensive rebounds. He had 3 blocks in this game. Cliff, there will be a lot said about toughness, and this is not related to Janai Broome. I know a lot of Auburn fans are going to relate it to it. But Janai Broome turned his ankle, and hopefully he will end up being okay. But Cliff Amori turns his ankle in this game. He lands on Jaren Stevenson, turns his ankle, and there was some question, would Cliff even be able to return? Is he going to be hurt? How bad is he going to be out? Because it was a pretty bad turn. And Cliff returned in this game, and he played. I'm not saying he was perfect. I'm sure he was in pain. You could tell that he was not 100%. But he returned in this game, and he finished this game. And there was a toughness that you could tell that he was just kind of gritting it out for his teammates. And that was a big deal, right? Alabama had already had problems where Grant Nelson had fouled out, and Mo D had fouled out, or was soon they're going to foul out. And so we really needed the size down low. At times, we ended up having to go Darion and Jaren as the 4-5, which Jaren played such a good game in the paint that we were able to do. But obviously, that's undersized for what we typically are going down in the paint. I thought that in general that most of the guys played, really played very, very tough. And I thought that this is a game that showed you that you can win in a lot of different ways, because Alabama's offense was still able to be fairly successful even without the rhythm, right? Usually when you have no rhythm and flow in a game, you can't, your offense just is very stagnant, right? When there's a lot of free throws, you get no rhythm, no flow, and your offense doesn't move. But oddly enough, Alabama actually, puts up almost a 1.2 points per possession and has a pretty good offense this game. And I thought that it was really the difference in the game that Alabama was able to find offense. And it really felt like at times the only offense A&M could get was the free throw, right? Payne ends up shooting 15 free throws. He ended up being their MVP of the game. And it really felt like he was just kind of hunting free throws. And it kept him in the game, but inevitably it was not enough to win this game. Alabama ends up winning the game and moves out of College Station with the win. A couple of people I do want to note, because I thought that they played massive, massive games. Obviously, Mark Sears, 27 points. He ends up 40% from 3, 90% from the line. Felt like he started the game pretty slow, but then was in complete control. They had kind of talked about him at moments in this game where it felt like he wasn't doing a whole lot, and then immediately he had 15 points, right? But that is Mark Sears, where it's a really quiet 15, quiet 20. So I thought that was normal. The other two that I think I want to talk about that really had successful games was Aden Holloway, again for another game, looked super comfortable, looked like he was in control. He had a few fouls that were a little careless, but in general felt like he was in control of what he wanted to do. And when he is comfortable with the ball in his hands, he's just really great, right? He's hitting shots. He's hitting shots at a high clip as well as finishing around the rim. and that's something that you don't always see. And Aiden being able to finish at the rim at the rate he has been really, really big for how well the offense has been able to move. And then the other one's Chris Youngblood. And I thought that Chris played probably his best game in Crimson so far. He had a big rebound to help seal this game. He had some big free throws to help seal this game. The only thing, if I have to say one thing about Chris, is it feels like he's being a little too unselfish. There were 2 moments in which he passed up shots that I think he had the better shot, and when he passed it up, we got an objectively worse shot. One of them was at the very end of the game when we ended up going 2 offensive rebounds, and Mark Sears finally hit the third 3. The second shot, Chris probably should have put up because he was wide open. He ended up pump faking. We ended up getting the 3 out of that possession, but that's one that I think Nate's going to want to have back because you aren't always going to get that third offensive rebound. And then the second one was on that same side. He passed up an open shot and gave the shot to Darion in the corner. Darion ends up missing it, and it just felt like because Chris was in rhythm and how he caught it, that if he just would have went up with the shot, I think that he had the better look and the better angle. So there are some things where on that, I think as he gets more in the flow of the offense, he's going to understand that he just has to take that shot. But that's the only thing that I would say about Chris is I think he's being a little too unselfish, which obviously isn't always a terrible thing, but I think in this moment it's hurting his offense because he definitely is a great 3-point shooter, and if he is in rhythm, I think that he's the guy you want taking those shots. So that's the one thing I will say about Chris is I would like to see him take more shots and, kind of hunt his shot a little bit. Obviously, don't put up something that's, out of character and not in the rhythm. But if it's in the rhythm and in the flow of the offense, don't pass it up just because you took one last possession, right? If you're still in flow, take the shot, right? At the end of the day, similar to what Nate says to Aiden, hey, you can't pass it up. I think that's the same thing with Chris. You just can't pass it up. And I know that there was a comment about the announcer said about him passing one up and thought he got pulled for it. I think that is absolutely the case where I think Nate's going to start pulling him for passing up those shots, especially when you go into film review and they realize, hey, this is the shot we want. And sometimes what Nate will say is if you pass up an open shot, you get a worse one. And I think in both cases, that ended up being the case. Again, with the first one, it worked out because we did get the rebound and Mark ended up hitting a 3 on the last shot. But you're not always going to get the rebound, so you can't go based off of, hey, we got the rebound, right? The shot that Chris had was just better than the one Mark had. And so, like I said, you're going to want to take that shot in the future. But Alabama does end up winning this game. Alabama gets to come out of College Station with a win, and you move on to the next game. So that's what I had to talk about as relates to that game. Like I said, obviously really good to leave College Station with a win. That was a really hard-fought game and not a game that you really want to drop, especially with them losing Wade Taylor. But you kind of survive in advance and move on to the next game.